So King of Kings stars an insane amount of talent for an animated feature. We're talking Luke Skywalker himself, Mark Hamill as King Herod, Pierce Brosnan as Pontius Pilate, Ben Kingsley as Caiaphas, Kenneth Branagh as Charles Dickens, Forrest Whitaker as Peter, Uma Thurman as Catherine Dickinson, Oscar Isaac as Jesus. This film is like Mars Attacks or It's a Mad, Mad World, saturating its film with stars, but in those films, you get to see these stars. There's sort of a fun surprise as they come up on screen, fun cameos. So I'm sort of confused why they spent so much money on stars you wouldn't notice in an animated film. Except for Pierce Brosnan, he's clearly noticeable as James Bond Pontius Pilate, and Mark Hamill for a split second sounds a bit like his portrayal of the Joker in the Batman animated series. But for the rest of this film, there wasn't really any reason for that cast to be in this movie. You don't know that it's Uma Thurman playing Dickinson's wife, or you don't know that Forrest Whitaker is playing Peter. It's just not that noticeable. I mean, you could have had some really talented voice actors for a lot cheap. Maybe it was just to get people to the theaters for this film. I mean, who knows? King of Kings is based on Charles Dickens' book, The Life of Our Lord, written for his young children between 1846 and 1849. It was published 64 years after his death in 1934, and I don't think his children actually heard it or read it, but I could be wrong. The film begins with Dickens in a theater publicly reading his tale of Ebenezer Scrooge, A Christmas Carol. While he's reading in front of a packed theater, his son, who is pretending to be King Arthur, messes up the whole performance, and Dickens is not happy. When the family gets home from the theater, an exhausted, frustrated Dickens is encouraged by his wife to read the manuscript he's been working on for his children to his young son, who's in trouble for messing up his performance. As the story begins, it's sort of a Princess Bride telling in the way that it's told.
What is this? Are you trying to trick me? Is this a kissing book?
Wait, just wait.
When's it get good?
Walter, his son, wants to hear about a king like King Arthur, swinging a sword and going into battle, but Dickens convinces him to listen to the story based on King Arthur, but a king who's more about peace and forgiveness. Walter isn't feeling it at first, but then becomes immersed in the story of Jesus, where he actually imagines himself interacting with the people in the story. The film is directed by Seong-Ho Jang, one of the leading visual effects artists and filmmaking in Korea. The film's animation is actually pretty good. The movements of the characters and the virtual camera moving through the scene is pretty impressive. The facial expressions of the characters were believable, especially when it came to the facial expression of Jesus. Sweet and compassionate and humble. They convey a look of love in the character's eyes that kind of penetrates through you in a way. And I've never really seen that before in this type of movie. The look of the characters themselves, I kind of had a problem with. They all had these huge heads on tiny little necks and made them look like unrealistic bobbleheads. Not a huge complaint, but at times it was a little unsettling. A story starts at the birth of Jesus and goes all the way to his death and resurrection, and it does a great job at not watering down the original story. It obviously doesn't have time to tell the whole story accounted in the written Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but it's very thorough for what it is for the most part. There's one scene where it takes you all the way back to Exodus to explain the Passover, so you have context for the Passover festival that's going on in the time of Jesus. It impressively gets a lot of things right, but also takes a lot of liberties and gets a few things wrong. Like the Magi visiting the baby Jesus, which didn't happen until after Jesus was already home and a little older. But for the most part, it's a pretty good retelling of the story of Jesus. But it's not a story we haven't seen or heard before. I went to see The Chosen in theaters a week or so ago and actually enjoyed that telling more. I was a little put off because it was advertised as a film, but it was just season 5 shown in theaters, so I didn't review it here. But there was a different feeling there and creative realism that I enjoyed more about those episodes. Of course, that series takes quite a few liberties itself on the story of Jesus too, and is really more for entertainment, I think. But this film was missing something. Heart maybe. I don't know. It was sort of all over the place. I went with my kids to see the film, and because of how detailed the story is, they were totally confused, and honestly, they were kind of bored. This film may cater better to the preteen than these 3 to 7 year olds. I had a hard time staying focused myself because I know the story and events, and I was like watching a recap of something that I had already seen. But the film seemed extremely long for an hour and 40 minutes, and it didn't take a lot of creative action to entertain you in the story as a film. I don't know if that even makes any sense. A lot of the Charles Dickens storyline I didn't really care about, and I felt like it got in the way, and I'm a huge Dickens fan. One of my favorite novels is Great Expectations, but it was just boring, and the back and forth from Dickens to the story he's telling takes you out of that story from time to time, not only emotionally, but visually. The animation choices are a lot of fun, actually. Lots of cool ideas, like when the disciples are introduced, they are paraded on a table as miniatures in front of the Dickens family. I just don't think that this story was told in the right way to make it more engaging and impactful, to make you feel emotional about the story. I didn't dislike this film, but at the same time, it didn't impact me the way that I thought it would. King of Kings is an okay telling of the story of Jesus told from Dickens' perspective, but it seems like it's more concerned about just presenting events than getting an emotional response. There are a few scenes where there is heart, but not enough to give credit to the actual story and events. I think it would be difficult for smaller kids to understand, and probably to people who haven't heard the story of Jesus at all. It's not a bad movie, but not a great one that this sort of story deserves. I'm giving King of Kings 2.5 stars out of 5 for all these reasons. It's sort of a middle-of-the-road sort of movie. Not really great, not really good, not really bad. I really wanted to like this movie. It's rated PG for some violent moments and a few scary images, but pretty much safe for the whole family, in my opinion. Let me know what you thought of King of Kings in the comments. Did you love it, or did you think that it was just okay, like me? Let me know in the comments, and again, thank you so much for watching the channel. I really appreciate you, and remember, don't wait till it streams. Let's go to the theater and let's see it together.
Look! Don't be afraid.
You really are the true King of Kings.